Welcome to my cellar again. First off, I'm going to record the unfiltered for this month tomorrow night. And it'll be up sometime over the weekend for the Patreon people. Then I didn't realize that it snuck up on me. So the Q&A for this month is actually going to be on the 3rd of September. I know it's 3 days late. And then the last Saturday of the month will be the normal time for the Q&A. And I will have a mass email sent out with the link to the Zoom account that I'm getting in the process of, and I'll have it by tomorrow, finished. So, sorry, that one got away from me a little, but we'll keep it on track, and I'll do the required number of these things, even if it means doing 2 of them in 4 weeks to keep on schedule. I try to be a man of my word. Okay, what were some of the most creative solutions you've encountered as a DM from a player? My God, there's been so many. I can think of 2 right offhand. They'll forever stay in my mind. The first one happened in, the first one I'm talking about, not chronologically, happened in a Wheel of Blame game. And they were confronted by an impenetrable hedge, trying to figure out a way. Well, not terribly. It was a nasty hedge. Nobody wanted to climb, but they noticed that there was these large butterflies. I mean, really big butterflies that were flying back and forth over the thing for the nectar in these flowers, great big bell or trumpet-shaped flowers. So after finding no easy way through, one of the players suggested that he strip naked, they cover him with nectar from these giant flowers, which all had a considerable amount of nectar in them each, and cover it all over his bodies. And he was confident that the butterflies would be attracted to the nectar and fly him over the wall. So the dice said it happened. And I thought it was pretty brilliant, actually. And when the dice say it happens, well, okay, it happened. Improbable, yes, but he got the die roll. The second time was in a prepared adventure that I was running at GaryCon. And the players were confronted with this tower, and they weren't quite sure, the players, the player characters weren't really too sure what it was they were up against. The players were wondering whether this was going to go sci-fi. Was this a rocket ship, or of strange design, or was it a tower that mystically transposed itself in different places? And the only way in was guarded by these 2 really, really enormous, oversized polar bears that walked around on their back feet all the time. And one of the players had a potion of giant strength that they just found. They didn't know what kind of giant, but they were able to determine there was a potion of giant strength with minimal field testing. And so one of the player who had it, who happened to be playing a dwarf PC, said, "Okay, I'm going to drink the potion of giant strength, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to wrestle with those giant polar bears." Now, the players already knew that had if and when the polar bears grabbed you and got you in a bear hug, I'd already devised a mechanism for inflicting hideous amounts of damage, impossibly. And so I thought, all right, I'll flip the chart around and I'll do it that way. So the dwarf drank the potion. He found out it was hill giant strength, and he said, "Arr!" He got all pumped up like he'd just been infused with 13 Red Bulls, and ran out and confronted the bear, grabbed the bear, got his arms around the bear just above the bear's back hips, and broke his back. Killed the bear. Okay, odd, but he got the rolls, and it worked. So he went over and he decided to do it to the second bear. And having already been successful, I gave him a better chance of doing it this time, and he did it again. So he killed these two. He killed two giant. And I mean, I'm talking giant. They were like 12 feet at the head when they stood up. And he killed them both with a dwarf character and a potion of hill giant strength. And of course, by having removed the guards, they got in. Yeah, those were both pretty original. Those are two that stand out. Good golly, there's been so many. Tim, I'd like to run a one-shot game as an introduction to D&D. Is there an optimal number of characters or encounters? Pardon me, not reading well tonight. To plan for a single 4-hour game session. Thank you. Well, first off, if you're going to run a one-shot, I'm assuming you're giving them pre-generated characters. And if you do, make sure there's some interesting things about the pre-gens. Neat knickknacks that they've picked up, that you can give a little description of. The more you can get the players to buy into the pre-generated characters you're giving them, the more they'll kind of pull up their trousers or skirts, or here I am again wondering about who I'm going to offend. Anyway, gird their loins. There's an equally offensive term, and get into the swing of it. Expect the first encounter to take forever, seemingly, because they're new at it. And you expect to take a little bit of a guiding hand to help them through that first encounter. And figure any other encounters are likely to last. If it's just a straight-up combat encounter, you figure, give a guesstimate how long you think it'll last. I am not in favor of overwhelming them. I'm actually in favor of doing some easy stuff. I'll give an example for many of you may have heard about this before, but a bunch of ladies that my wife and one of the ladies' husbands that were in a Zumba group that my wife was in wanted to, would you run a game for us, and so most of them have never played ever, and two of them, I think, had played once in college several years ago. So what I did, and what I recommend, is that you set it up with some familiar trappings. In this case, they were all members of this temple, this sisterhood, who were all into fitness and good eating, and they were vegans, and they tended the earth, and et cetera, et cetera. So I gave them something that was sort of an ideal of what they all were or could be anyway. And they all trained with these little 5-foot staffs, walking staffs, that they were quite good at. So there was a weapon that already began with an assumed proficiency. And because you want to make those that especially that first combat, you want to make that go as smooth and easy as possible. So I gave them a decent proficiency, so they weren't starting out as like 0, 1, or 2 level characters. They were they had a proficiency. They had a goal. Someone had stolen their sacred bell that they rang when it was time to do meditation and whatever. And along with that, they'd stolen the finger bone of the beloved founder of their order. So they set off to recover the bone. And it was mostly outdoors because the hobgoblins stole it and ran away, but they kept leaving, being stupid hobgoblins. Every once in a while, they'd leave a track in the mud on the side of the road or whatever. So they just went out and they had a couple of mild encounters, 1 or 2 distractions that they didn't, potential distractions that they didn't bite on. And then there was a serious in the fact that it could have gone badly if they hadn't played well. And then a final confrontation with the hobgoblins, which by this time they were into the game so much that those hobgoblins didn't stand a chance. It ran just about 4 hours, and I don't know, I guess there were maybe 4 or 5 encounters. You can't make a set number because you don't know how long any given one might take. I had a couple of others that I could have sprung on that adventure, but didn't. Time constraints, arbitrariness, whatever. I could have, especially if I thought they needed a little more guidance in how to do combat and, in a big confused melee. But have 5 or possibly 6 up your sleeve, but don't plan to use more than 4 of them. Now, if you're underground, well, not just things they find in rooms, but obstacles that they have to figure out how to get across, a rushing stream that's just a little too wide to try jumping, or rubble that has to be cleared. Those can be counted as an encounter because those things you're capable, if they figure out a brilliant way to do it, of awarding extra experience. So in that regard, I always looked at it, I classified some what others might think mundane things as encounters simply because it was a possible choice or a possible place where they might do something brilliant and therefore get a few extra experience points that week. I think the whole how real do you want to make it is something to think about. AD&D is a game and full of mechanics that do stretch reality. So why not keep it fun for the players? So learn your players and what they like. Good advice. It's supposed to be fun. Once you get a regular set of players going, it's like playing poker. Learn to read their tells. Most of them, unlike poker, will be very easy to read, and sometimes verbal, and sometimes loudly verbal. But if you, for instance, you like riddles, and you find out that the group really doesn't like riddles, well, don't. Or if you do, make it a riddle that they have to solve to do some really good thing or really big thing or, something like that. You'll learn your group by the first few sessions when a player's eyes glaze over, that you've gone too deep for that person, or too far out of field or whatever. It's not one of those things that I can teach people how to do. I can only suggest what they look for, and both visually look for and expect to empathize or embrace or understand your group. And if you're not laughing frequently, you're not doing it right. Whether it's a humorous encounter or just a wisecrack to break the tension. And it shouldn't always be from you. However, you can be as snarky as you want. So, you make it as gritty as the players want it to be. And you're comfortable taking it to that point. If it should always be somewhere within your comfort zone, but you can be challenged, and you'll be better, and the game might be better for it, and the players hopefully will be better for it. Okay, first of all, thanks for answering my question a couple weeks back about backseat DMs. I really appreciate your insight into this particular problem. After a few more sessions of playing, that player has communicated to me how much they've enjoyed the game I've created, and I suppose that's all that really matters. Yes, that is the first thing that matters. Hold that thought. Hope you do it. Okay. But if their idea of enjoying the game is still being the know-it-all beach master, you do this, you do that, we'll do this. Well, yeah, as long as everybody else is also having fun, then you're home free. If I was just going in and going to play with a bunch of, 18-year-olds who hadn't been playing more than 4 or 5 years maybe, and just dominated and directed, and they were just, for whatever reason they thought they ought to do what I said, well, I'd be having fun too. That person shouldn't be having a great deal of fun if it's at the expense of the other players. Then there's a question of, well, if the other players want to keep following this guy, well, maybe he's got that magic kernel of charisma that leaders have. These are all nuances that a good DM will pick up on and figure out how to make the campaign and the gaming sessions better by using them. Your players are another tool for creating a wonderful story and a great milieu to live in. Alright, great show. Your views always make me consider my choices as a DM. I know you no longer run campaigns, but how do you decide to end one? Alright, there's a couple of immediate answers to that. The first one is, if you have set out a goal at the beginning, and through side journeys and side quests and distractions and whatever, and you've gotten there. If you set out the beginning campaign that you were going to find the mythical, we're not even sure if it exists, laboratory of somebody there, and all what you might expect to find there, and over the course of many adventures, you finally find your way there, and you achieve it, you get it, that's a campaign right there. Now, here's how you might spur your players to want to go off down this new campaign /tangent And that is, as you're getting close to ending up this, finding the laboratory of the mad wizard, or whatever, drop in, start putting in some hooks on something new. Let them find a half of a scroll that, talks about even greater things than what they've just done, or something like that. And sometimes they'll end it for you because, okay, we've dealt with the big bad evil guy. Hey, let's go look into that thing and whatever, and it'll end itself in that goal has been reached. The campaign as a whole need never end, because as long as those players are existing in the game world, alive in the game world, they can always go off and do some other adventure, to get on a ship and sail to another continent and do other things. So in the global sense, the campaign doesn't have to end. But in the smaller, more focused sense, okay, that goal's been reached. Now what do we do? Now as a DM, you can choose to say, okay, hey, let's do all, maybe the campaign takes a year to finish. Okay, that was great fun. Let's start all over again. Retire those characters and start afresh. I always felt it was the struggle that was the most fun, not standing on top of the pyramid hurling firebolts. That's always been my opinion, and just my opinion. I grant you that. It's my opinion, worth whatever you paid for it. Of course, the Patreon guys now, I guess I can't use that slogan or saying anymore. Anyway, that's one way to do it. Kill them all. Let them die if they go for their final confrontation and screw up. Sometimes you'll know. Sometimes it'll come to a natural end, and sometimes you'll know that it's gone so sour. It's time to start a new one. And you can handle it with your players a couple of different ways. You can be blunt and forthright and say, I just don't think you guys are into this anymore, so let's mix it up. Or you can be less blunt and say that or it could be true that you're no longer enthused by the campaign. I think you know when a campaign's dead. But in the global world thing, the world of Greyhawk, the world of Blackmore, whatever you call your world, my world's Mikanda, the players are still there. They're still capable of getting back together and doing something different or new. And they're still there even if you decide to start new players. Do like we used to do and build up a stable of players. It's quite satisfying having half a dozen players. Now again, I'm using original D&D standards, but having a half a dozen 5th to 7th level players back then was a heady feeling. It's like you had a really good gladiator school, or you were owner of the winning faction in the chariot races. Do I have any recollection about the Valley of the Mage? Nope. That's something that came after I left, apparently. Tim, did you ever get nervous about DMing? What advice do you have for DMs who get nervous? I was nervous the first couple of times I was trying to teach my group down at Carbondale how to play the game. Because I didn't, except for Tom Wom, I was older than everybody else in the group. usually by about 4 years, because of the 4 years I'd spent in the Navy and then come out and gone back to school. So there was a certain deference to the fact that I was the oldest guy in the group, unless Tom was there that week. And I didn't want that to be the reason that we were going to do something. I didn't want him to defer to me for that reason. So yeah, I was nervous because I wanted to present the game without any of those trappings. And first couple of times we did it, and the second time was a little easier. Yeah. First couple of times I ran tournament games, like in the Giant series. I was kind of nervous there, and this was more not that it wasn't that I was worried about my skills. I was worried about what kind of table am I going to get, and because when you're doing tournaments, players tend to play differently. In those days, we ran tournaments that you could come and bring your group of 6 players and play as a group, or 6 or 5 or whatever, or we would just bing, 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 make up teams. So you never knew what you were going to get. What advice do I give to DMs who get nervous? Well, not wishing to encourage anyone to do anything illegal by the rules of their state. Go smoke a bowl. Have half a doober. Just chill out. If they're new players, they're not judging you. They're not going to judge you. They're going to judge this game you're introducing them to. Even without the cannabinoid assistance or alcoholic assistance, remember that they're not, with newbies, they're not judging you. They have no idea whether you're a good DM or a bad DM. With experienced players, they're going to gauge you, they're going to judge you based on other players that they've played with, other DMs they've played with. Don't sweat it. You have no way of knowing. They could have played with really crappy DMs, and they're going to look at you as the second coming of Ted. Going to do your TED talk from the pinnacle on how to be a great player. They got no way of knowing. Don't worry about it. They don't know when you make a mistake unless you go, oops. They don't know. That's what goes on behind the screen stays behind the screen for the most part. And what behind the screen is really a euphemism for what goes on up in here in your noggin. They got no way of knowing that, ooh, you just made a little 30-degree turn and took it down another place because of an idea that sprung into your mind because of something one of the players just said. My advice has for a long time been, stay loose. Be ready to if you're a basketball team, you can play zone, but be ready to play man-to-man when you have to. Or, I'm not going to go into all the other soccer and baseball and all the other examples I could give you. Okay. Question. What is balance in RPGs? When people talk about balance in games, it can get a little bit esoteric. The word has multiple applications, from the mechanics needing to be balanced to balanced attitudes of the players. What is the ideal balance in those areas for you? Say we break it down into mechanics, number of players, situational, and player attitudes. But we may like to remember the granularly focused among us, balance fighting encounters, balance and risk reward. So, balance in mechanics, balance in number of players, regular versus one-off, small versus large. Player attitudes, balance in fight encounters, balance in risk versus reward. Okay. In my mind. Okay? In my mind. Mechanics. Complex enough to handle most situations, and understandable enough for you to extrapolate if it hits something that nobody could have thought of. That's a good balanced mechanic. One of the players can understand combat, the mechanics of combat. The sooner they pick up on that, the more involved they become, the more they buy into it, the more they absorb it, and the more fun they'll have. Balance the number of players. Regular versus a one-off, small versus large. Well, my regular group was 7 to 9. When I was running the campaign here in Cincinnati a few years back, trying out all the stuff that I was writing, ended up writing, some of which got published by Eldridge. I had some nights 9, some nights 7. It's harder to do large groups, but I like doing large groups in playtesting because the more players, the more people that are going to torque and bend the rules and the situations that you've created in that. And so there's more stress put on your creation. That way you don't have to play it 25 times. You can, the more minds attacking a puzzle, the more likely the puzzle is to be solved quickly. Regularly, it's whatever you're comfortable with. If you're doing a one-off, particularly if you're trying to interest new players, then make it as big as the number of players that want to play. Now, I've got a technique I use with big numbered groups, and it involves literally working my way around the table. Okay, what are you doing? 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 And by the time I get around the group, I've either got an answer or a result for the beginning one. Okay, you were not able to find anything and no word of it. You, however, when you went to the other district in the city, you may have found some confirming information, and you go. And I'm making up results. No, your search was fruitless. No, you got thrown out of a bar for asking too many questions. I've just given them answers, plausible answers. I'm keeping everybody involved, bought into the game, because they're all doing something. In this case, I'm giving examples from when they were searching a small city looking for some stolen merchandise. But whatever the circumstance is, that's the only time you break up the party. You don't break up the party underground. We all know that. And you don't break up the party in the wilderness. We know that. Smaller parties get eaten easier. But that's a way to to keep a large group involved is point right at, make eye contact. What are you doing? Okay, where are you going? And you go around the table like that. That's the easiest way I know of to handle a big group and keep them all feeling like they're engaged in the game. And I find that when I start doing that, I stand up instead of sitting behind. I don't use a screen much. I don't use a screen because I don't carry one. The beautiful one that Jim Wampler made for me weighs about 5 pounds. And so I'm not putting it in my backpack. But anyway, pretty soon several of us are standing up, and it's becoming more animated and more fun is being had. Imagine that. Balance in player attitudes. Well, if they're not all having fun, something's wrong. Now fun is expressed differently by different people. As long as you don't have one who's continually, perpetually pissing off the other players or doing things that piss the other players off, you're okay. Player attitudes is just what everybody comes. Everybody doesn't come to every session the same. Bad day at work, bad day at home, whatever, not feeling well. Those are harder and harder to control. Those are what they come to the table with, and then it's up to you to make the smoothie with using them all. Fighting encounters. I boiled down the fighting to its simplest old school style. So that when I run at cons, somebody that's never played D&D before, and I get them once in a while, or someone that hasn't played in a while or whatever, can get right in and grasp it. I do a very, very simple. I don't have, under 95% of circumstances, I do not have the players square off against the bad guys. In melee, whatever you call it, I use a 0 to 9 initiative, roll. I will admit that a lot of my encounters I use similar beasts. 3 thises or 3 that, 2 that's or whatever. And so the number to hit is going to be the same. So in your turn, you roll to hit. I don't do a lot of called shots and stuff like that. Again, it's situational. And you hit or you don't. You roll the damage you inflict, and I know which one it went on. Because usually by random, I will do the same thing. I will pick one, because the way I do melee is a big swirling mass, literally a ballet of death, if you want to, really bad. Anyway, and so maybe they got lucky and they hit the one that was almost dead anyway and they killed it. Or, oops, they hit the one that had hardly been touched yet, but it's been touched now. So I make it as simple as possible. All you really got to do is roll dice and announce what you got. And if it's success, you roll some more dice to see what you did. And then I've already figured out what or who you're going to do it to. Real simple, real easy. Because for me, the fighting isn't the game. For me, the game is the story, the obstacles that I create, and their novel ways of trying to solve said obstacles. Risk versus reward. Great rewards should come from great risk. You don't give out 850 experience points for killing a goblin, and he wasn't carrying 300 pieces of silver, which can happen if you use random charts for rolling up random monsters and what have you. I tend to look at risk versus reward in the end goal. That's that campaign ending goal. And along the way, there should be great risk, but great risk should be rewarded. And not just for killing shit or walling them up in their cave, or whatever. But I will, most of the time, don't now with a wheel, but I will recognize brilliant solutions and award the same experience that I would if you went down and killed them or did something like that. I will reward well for a way around, a workaround. If you remove the threat, whether it's with the edge of your sword or unlikely parlay and negotiation, it's still experience. And experience is one of the things in D&D that is pretty wide open. Anything you did is experience. Now, I have known DMs that take away experience for doing something silly or in their mind stupid. No, experience, good or bad, in real life is stuff you've done and hopefully learned from if you didn't benefit from it. I treat it the same way. If the end result is finding a hoard that's guarded by a very, very old silver dragon, well, that hoard ought to have a hell of a lot of shit in it. And that silver dragon ought to be able to deal with you easily. But then again, those are elements of your story. Okay, now, this is it reasonable that an enterprising goblin might open up a shop in a dungeon? All right, how are we going to define dungeon? There's a series of books about the world of Drakenor that was a dungeon that became self-aware, and then before you know it, you as the reader they've all come to life. They all exhibit a life of their own, and they get into doing things, and they're really, really, really good. They're by Hans Cummings, and they were a dungeon because there was a city involved and whatever. And then that broad sense, of that broad definition that applies in Dungeons and Dragons of what is a dungeon. A dungeon is something you go adventure in. Is a dungeon a city? Well, in the one sense, yes. In the more reality-based sense, no. I can't even see, let alone like the idea of a dungeon that's so well traveled that some orc sets up a lemonade stand at the entrance. Now, this person that wrote this if they want to further expound on why they're, I don't see a dungeon is, in the one sense, underground. Now, there's several good books out there where entire cities are underground. Not like War of the Worlds, but underground. But I couldn't see it. Now, if you're talking about a big metropolis that springs up somewhere around us, around or in ruins, well, then I guess they sell anything that they thought that would make them a buck. And then it would be up to you, the DM, to figure out, well, how smart is, are they going to try and are they going to try and just sell shiny mica rocks, fool's gold, or are they wise enough to? Now it's a whole lot of interpretation on your part, Mr. DM or Miss DM or whatever your favorite pronoun is, DM. So I'm not going to address the second half of the question because I don't see a goblin setting up in a dungeon as I know to define dungeon. All right, please tell us what books you're reading at the moment. Do you read nonfiction much? I wonder if you're reading any historical books. Historical fiction or nonfiction, since you taught history for a spell, I believe. What's hot, what's not? Well, I can't tell you what's hot, what's not. Don't know. What am I reading right now? I'm reading a book called Small World, written by a man named Evison. And it's pretty interesting. It flashes back between 2019 and it started in 1851. Some people from Ireland, an escaped slave from the South, and it's weaving all these families and jumping back and forth. So the anyway, it's historical. I like it because they're going through my part of the Midwest, Chicago in the 50s, over the Mississippi, from Rock Island to Davenport, Iowa. They're building railroads and that, and I find that interesting. Do I read nonfiction? Yeah. I recently finished a book that Jim Whimper loaned me called Born Fighting, talking about that particular breed of people called the Scots-Irish, who, after reading this book, I'm now convinced are solely responsible for several of the ills in our culture. The gun fetish nut, pry it out of my cold dead hands, don't trust the government, yeah, but they had some great leaders. Patton was a Scots-Irish, but the Scots-Irish as a people for many centuries have had a chip on their shoulder, and then they moved into Appalachia, and they immigrated, and they moved to Appalachia, and got worse. I like novels based on history. I like mysteries. Again, I say this, but it means what I like. It has to be well researched. They can't, just can't put the characters in a toga and call it a Roman mystery. I don't read a lot of nonfiction nowadays, though I do it in spurts, and I'll tell you why and how. I get this really great calendar once a year of books that are on sale. And what I do is I go through and I see all the ones that look, and there's a lot of military history and nonfiction in there. And because I don't read a lot of popular novelists or stuff like that. That's not what I'm into. Anyway, I write down titles and authors. And then I get in the catalog system for the Hamilton County and Cincinnati Library. And I order them up through there if they have them. They don't always have them. Sometimes, if I'm lucky, they got 40% of my list because some of them are a little exotic or esoteric. So my readings hops all over. Up till about a year ago, I used to read a whole bunch of different military history magazines and that, and then I started realizing that it was maybe once every 3 or 4 months, one of them would have an article about something I hadn't read about before, so I quit subscribing to them. I read the newspaper every morning, and I'm a big patron of my public library, big patron. And this past couple of weeks, I've been a big deal down there because they have this thing about they're focusing on interesting people in the community, and I'm this month's interesting person. I would have thought. Okay. D20 Delving. This is the Kickstarter I've told you I'm involved with. This is a response about it. D20 Delving was worth backing anyway, but with the meltdown of a certain JL over it, I suggest people back it just for the schadenfreude. Okay, we all know who JL is, and he had a meltdown. I never have read it, but I've just been heard about it. He's saying awful nasty things and everything. But somebody pointed out to me that D20 Delving is unique in a couple other things, and I find it ironic. I didn't see this at the very beginning. I thought it would be a hoot to put an audio element into a game, into a board game. But then it was pointed out to me that this is a godsend for people that are sight-impaired. They don't have, they don't have to be able to read the cards. It was pointed out to me that developmentally delayed or impaired people who maybe don't read well can play this game because they don't have to. With everybody doing the same thing, listening to what the card says, there's no difference, no stigma. Now, I'm really ashamed, I think, partially of myself for not seeing that when I was approached with the project. But yeah, I have a wonderful friend that I've gamed with for 30 years whose eyesight has gone really bad. And this would be perfect for him. We could all play together again because we wouldn't have to read his cards for him or anything because that kills all the secret ones. And this game doesn't have any, but you get my drift. That would be wonderful. So now I'm doubly glad to be involved in this. Not only would it be fun to add my voice, but now I'm glad to be able to help people that are unable to read or slow to read or slow readers. I'm delighted. So go look at it, D20 Delving. By today's standards, it seems to be priced pretty much the way everybody's is. For a board game with the quality, yada, 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 yada. I didn't have anything to do with that. I was brought into it afterwards. But I wouldn't have done it if I thought it was shoddy or crappy. So, if it doesn't fun, that's fine. We'll wait until the fall and probably try to kickstart it again because I think it's a project worth backing simply because of what it offers sight-impaired or developmentally impaired people the opportunity to play with no impairment, no impediment. So that's all I got for now. I'm going to do an unfiltered tomorrow and send out the link. It should be up on Saturday, I hope. If not by Saturday, Monday. You'll have the link. In the meantime, Dodada Gobi. Hello, and Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. DSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.